We grow up absorbing a story long before we ever question it. It's passed down at family dinners, echoed by older relatives, and plastered across billboards with smiling couples holding oversized keys. It's framed as maturity itself, the defining checkpoint that separates those who've made it from those who haven't. According to this story, renting is a mistake, a leak in your financial bucket. You're told that every rent check is money burned, while buying a home is painted as the smartest move you'll ever make, the ultimate upgrade from childhood to adulthood. Over time, this idea stops sounding like advice and starts feeling like truth. It seeps into your identity. If you're still renting in your 30s, there's a quiet embarrassment attached to it, like you missed an exam everyone else passed. You start to feel behind, irresponsible, unfinished. That pressure pushes people into buying homes they can barely support, maxing out what the bank will allow, normalizing financial stress, convincing themselves that discomfort equals progress. A signature on a mortgage becomes proof of intelligence, even when the numbers underneath don't add up. But here's the part no one likes to say out loud. For a huge number of people living in today's economy, that story is outdated. The assumptions behind it no longer hold. Markets shifted, costs exploded, and the unquestioned belief that owning a home automatically builds wealth has quietly cornered an entire generation into being asset-heavy and cash-starved. The uncomfortable reality is this: for many watching, the home you own is not working for you. It's working against you. It's not a productive investment, it's a consumption choice financed with leverage, wearing the costume of wealth. I'm Alex. I spend an unhealthy amount of time pulling apart the math that the housing industry prefers to keep vague. If you feel boxed in by the pressure to buy, or if you already own a home and can't figure out why it doesn't feel like success, stick around. Today we're going to pull the rent versus buy debate apart slowly and carefully. We'll uncover the costs of ownership that never come back to you. We'll look at the one ratio that actually matters when choosing where to live. And we'll see why, in many cases, the renter who invests intentionally ends up wealthier, calmer, and far more flexible than the homeowner locked into decades of payments. To understand this, we need to redefine what wasting money really means. When you rent, the transaction is simple. You pay for shelter. That money is gone, and no one pretends otherwise. But when you own a home, you're told something very different, that your monthly payment is forced savings, that it's equity quietly accumulating in the background. Especially early on, that belief is deeply misleading. A large portion of what homeowners pay every month disappears just as completely as rent does. It never returns, it never increases your net worth. These are costs that feel invisible because they're bundled into ownership, but financially they behave exactly like rent. Start with the cost of borrowing money. Mortgage interest dominates the early years of a long-term loan. For a standard 30-year mortgage, the majority of your payment at the beginning doesn't reduce what you owe, it compensates the bank for lending to you. You might send thousands each month and only see a few $100s actually lower your balance. The rest evaporates. You're not paying yourself, you're leasing money. Then there are property taxes, essentially a permanent subscription fee paid to the city or state for the right to stay put. In many regions, this alone rivals the cost of renting a modest apartment. Add to that maintenance. Not the fun upgrades, but the constant, dull repairs, appliances failing, roofs aging, pipes leaking, pests showing up uninvited. Over time, this quietly consumes a meaningful percentage of the home's value every single year. Insurance follows. Then come the transaction costs. Fees, commissions, closing expenses, waiting patiently until the day you buy or sell, ready to claim a chunk of your equity in one swipe. When you total all of this, interest, taxes, upkeep, insurance, fees, you often discover something unsettling. The true non-recoverable cost of owning a home frequently matches and sometimes exceeds the cost of renting something comparable. The difference is psychological, not mathematical. You didn't eliminate a landlord, you just replaced one with a group: the bank, the government, and the repair aisle at the hardware store. Most of this decision can be distilled into a single number: the price-to-rent ratio. Think of it as the valuation multiple of housing. You calculate it by dividing the purchase price of a home by the annual cost of renting a similar one. A lower number suggests buying might make sense. A higher number signals caution. Historically, when that ratio sits comfortably below the mid-teens, ownership can be justified. Once it climbs past the low 20s, renting starts to dominate financially. Today, in many global cities, places like San Francisco, New York, Toronto, Sydney, that ratio has drifted far beyond historical norms. When it reaches those levels, the math becomes loud. In those markets, renting is effectively a discount. You get to live inside an extremely expensive asset while paying only a fraction of what it would cost to finance it. The owner absorbs the volatility, the surprise repairs, the downside risk. You're consuming housing services while someone else speculates on future appreciation that isn't guaranteed. But the most damaging part of home ownership isn't monthly, it's upfront, the down payment. This is the cost that rarely gets emotional airtime. To buy a high-priced home, you might need to hand over 6 figures in cash. Once you do, that money is frozen. It can't earn, it can't be reallocated, it can't help you breathe easier during uncertainty. Invested elsewhere, historically, that same capital would have had decades to compound. By anchoring it to a single property in a single neighborhood, you're making a concentrated bet that local real estate will outperform diversified global markets. Over long periods, that bet hasn't paid particularly well. Broad asset classes have quietly done the heavy lifting, while housing returns mostly kept pace with inflation, with occasional bursts driven by leverage and timing rather than fundamentals. Renting while investing flips that equation. Your capital stays liquid, your risk stays diversified, your expected return improves. Done consistently, this approach turns flexibility into an advantage rather than a compromise. And flexibility matters, more than spreadsheets admit. A home is weight. In a fast-moving economy, the ability to relocate for opportunity is an asset. Renters can pivot quickly. Homeowners face delays, fees, and risk every time life changes. Selling a house is expensive and slow, and the cost of getting out at the wrong moment can erase years of progress overnight. Buying a home often means betting that your current location will remain ideal for the next decade. If that bet fails, the exit is painful. Renting preserves choice, and in uncertain times, choice carries real value. Yes, rents rise, and yes, fixed-rate mortgages offer protection against some inflation, but ownership doesn't insulate you completely. Taxes climb, insurance premiums jump, repair costs inflate. Meanwhile, invested assets tend to grow alongside inflation. When returns outpace rent increases, renters quietly gain ground. There's also a lifestyle cost we rarely price in. Owning property is work. It consumes weekends, mental energy, and attention. Renting transfers that burden elsewhere. Time reclaimed can be reinvested into skills, income, rest. Sometimes the absence of responsibility is the upgrade. None of this means buying is always wrong. Ownership makes sense when timelines are long, ratios are reasonable, and personal priorities align with permanence. But buying out of fear of missing out, fear of judgment, fear of wasting rent, is rarely rational. A primary residence is a place to live. Treating it as a guaranteed wealth engine creates fragility. Real wealth grows from assets that generate income, not expenses you must continuously feed. So don't let tradition make the decision for you. Run the numbers, look past the slogans, and if the math favors renting, do it confidently. Invest deliberately, stay liquid, let someone else worry about the roof. See you in the next one.